Hi and welcome on this channel. If you're new here, my name is Maureen and here we talk about mindset, we talk about breathwork, and we talk about spirituality. And so today is just you and I, and we're gonna chat about drugs, alcohol, addictions, and how I managed to get out of stress and anxiety without touching on these types of addiction. I had another type of addiction that I will also chat about, but how I've managed to kind of clear this out of my way, and why I'm touching on stress and anxiety with addictions is simply because when we are in a state of stress and anxiety, we kind of look for anything that will make us feel better. And we usually find things that we have control over. So it's usually some things that we will inflict on our bodies, or something that will, eat or take and have within our bodies, because we can control that in our lives. And so sometimes we turn to drugs, alcohol, food, all of these to have something we feel like we have control over, and to kind of fill up that void that we may be feeling when we're stressed or anxious. And another reason why people do take drugs or food as addictions when they're stressed or anxious is because it's kind of a fast way to relieve the feeling, and having control over something, it's easier than actually kind of go inside or slow down, even cut out a couple of things, because sometimes we feel like we don't have any choice, right? When we stress or anxious, when you have a work, can you stop working? No, not really. So it's hard to kind of find that other solution, and sometimes just the easier solution to cope is to turn towards drugs and alcohol to find some sense of relief, of quick relief, because doing that type of work, and I put quote unquote work, is that it takes time. We're never gonna know how long it's gonna take. And when you go to therapy, for example, this could take years to solve the problem. And so not a lot of, but I find, people turns towards these types of addictions. And so today I just wanted to chat a little bit about how, kind of explain to you what my journey was in this and how I've managed to do that, and maybe hopefully helping you along the way, maybe inspire some of you to do a few changes in your life, or bring awareness maybe for the future, where you have a lot of stress and anxiety and you just don't know what to do. Then you can remember that I have done a podcast episode, or if you're watching a YouTube video here. And I wouldn't say I was ever addicted, definitely not to drugs. I never touched drugs outside of very recently in my psychedelic experience. So when I sit in ceremony, there's an intention behind the psychedelic experience. So these were the only times that I actually took drugs. When I was a bit younger, I never touched drugs to parties or in my daily life. That was not really my thing. That being said, I was more turned towards alcohol. And I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic, but there was definitely a lot of alcohol and party involved in this. And that's because I was just feeling a lot of stress to get my life together, to get my plans in place. And I just felt like when I was partying, when I was drinking, I kind of let myself loose, and I was not worrying about anything outside of the present moment that I was in. I just really wanted to enjoy, to have fun, to focus on this very present moment. And I didn't want to worry. I was a student at the time, so I didn't want to worry about money. I didn't want to worry about my grades, my classes, etc., and all of that. And so when I was around, I think I was 22, this is when this really kind of kicked off, and I was starting to drink more than I would usually do. And I would never drink alone. It would always be in a social environment. But I wasn't aware of this. I think a lot of the times when we fall into these patterns, we're just not aware that we're falling into this. This is extremely subconscious, because inside, when we have all this stress and the anxiety, we just need something to comfort us, and we will just take anything outside. And usually the quickest thing is alcohol, drugs, food, that are easy to kind of comfort, I can never say that, comfort ourselves, and help us cope. That really what it is, helping these types of addictions help you to cope. And so kind of time went on, and I started to realize that maybe I was drinking a little bit too much. And I had this awareness that I hadn't had before, and that maybe it was time for me to put a stop and, find something else and really dive inside what I was feeling. And so this is when I started to dive back, because I knew about, spirituality and wellness before, but this is when I really started to kind of dive back into it and really started to focus more on my emotions, my feeling. And it was a bit scary at first, to kind of let go of what I would call the fun side. Because when you're 22, the fun side is to party and be out and laugh and dance, and that's what's considered fun. And so that's what you do when you want to cope with stress and anxiety. And this is also how other people around perceive you, right? They see kind of this fun person, and it's more fun than saying, I'm going to therapy, or I'm doing this work, my inner work. That's not exactly fun when you're in your early 20s, when you say that to other people. So I think I had to really change my perspective on what it meant to be fun and what I really wanted to do in my life. And I've really noticed that to me it was more important to do that inner work. Maybe I wouldn't seem fun and I didn't care to do that work for me, because no one else could do it. And what if people would perceive me a certain way, or what if people would perceive me as fun, but what if I'm miserable inside? There's no point in that. So I really wanted to do it for myself. And I think that should be the first step. You shouldn't do it for anyone else, because you will lose the motivation. When you realize that, oh, maybe I'm too stressed, what are my coping mechanisms? And you realize that one of your coping mechanisms is taking drugs, alcohol, and food, etc. Then who do you want to stop for when you realize that? Don't stop for others, because you will lose motivation. You will lose that will. You have to do it for yourself and find a good reason of why you want to do it. Put an intention into it. Why do you want to stop these patterns? Why do you want to stop this stress and anxiety? And so this is when I really started to dive back into all the spirituality world, dive back into my emotions, what I was feeling, what I wanted in my life. And what I wanted is, yes, to have fun, but fun kind of changed over time. And I think, as you move from your early 20s to kind of your late 20s, I can't believe I'm saying that, but I am in my late 20s. And so when you kind of, move towards those late 20s, fun have a very different meaning, and fun will seem different. So who do you want to be, when you don't go to clubs anymore, or fun is something completely different than your early 20s? And I really started to ask myself these types of questions, and I really started to cut down my alcohol intake. That also came with the fact that I moved countries, and I went studying into another country, and this was getting more intense. So I started to have more stress in my classes for grades, for just my homework. Basically, I was working every weekend. And so then I was not drinking so much alcohol, but I was drinking coffee. Yes. But I was drinking a lot of coffee to the point that sometimes I was shaking. So that was my new addiction. Sometimes we're like, oh, I cut down on this. But then you just find yourself being addicted to something else. And, taking too much of something else to cope, basically. That was my way of coping. That was like, oh, but I'm drinking coffee, but it's okay. It's legal. It's not like I'm taking pills. Really, it's not that better, that much better. And so I was taking coffee to the point of shaking. And I did this because I needed to stay awake. I needed to stay alert and focus to do my homework, basically. And then again, I didn't want to stop. I was not ready because I really wanted to have good grades. I really wanted to finish. This was my last year of bachelor. So I really wanted to finish this year. And so I didn't want to cut down on my caffeine intake. Again, I'm not really sure that I actually realized I drank that much caffeine and maybe it was not so good for me. Those are things that I think I managed to reflect on way later. So as I've mentioned before, sometimes we're just too much into it and we just don't see ourselves falling into this. And this is kind of the dangerous pitfalls of it. And the scary thing is that when you actually don't notice it. But, that transformed caffeine intake was my new addiction, kind of. And then it stopped, and until recently I was doing way better because I started to do more practice. I started to do breathwork. I started to do more yoga, and I started to do more of the mindset work. And that's what really helped me to bring awareness to the addictions, quote unquote, that what I was putting into my body to cope with how I was feeling. And I didn't want to be stressed anymore. I just didn't want to. I started to understand that all these things were maybe not beneficial for me, and that some things needed to shift, and that I needed to go to the root of the problem. The root of the problem was my stress, and that I needed to do something about it, put more boundaries. This took me years to achieve, okay? The work I'm talking to you about just now took me really years to do. It's not easy, and it's hard to say no, to stop, those coping mechanisms you've put in place to feel instantly better. It's hard to say no to that and to stop it and to not dive into it again or in another form. And it took me years to get to that point where I would be able to understand where the stress was in my body when I would start feeling too much stress and when I needed to simply rest. And this takes a lot of willpower to, for example, say to your work, like, sorry, I just need a moment alone, or I'm gonna slow down today. I'm still gonna be here, but I'm just going to slow down. I'm going to take one thing at a time because this is me today. And having that awareness also helps you cope with that stress, with that anxiety. And until recently, I didn't realize, but until recently, I was reading a book in my book club that's called Easy Way to Stop Emotional Eating by Alan Carr. I really recommend it, by the way, if actually to everyone. I think everyone should be aware of our eating habits. And so I was reading this, and then I realized that for a few months I've been emotionally eating. I was eating more food than I felt like I needed, and it was definitely something emotional that I was trying to cope with and that I was not aware of. So when you start seeing yourself kind of falling back into these patterns, this is also a really good trick, basically, to maybe say, oh, wait, I'm doing this. is how am I feeling? Is there something in me? I'm not saying that if you drink 1 glass of wine, for example, that it means that, you know, you have stress and anxiety and you want to cope with something. No, this is more on, you know, your daily life. Like, what are you doing repeatedly that maybe wouldn't be so good for you? Or maybe you feel like you don't do this because you enjoy it or you need it, but you're doing it because there's something deeper into it. And that's what it was really with me and the emotional eating part. I was just, I was not taking that much caffeine. I was not drinking. I'm not drinking very much. I'm drinking very rarely today. I'm not taking drugs. So am I trying to cope with something? What's going on in my life right now that could bring some stress? And it's funny because really sometimes I don't notice these things. I just tend to be like, I'm not stressed, like, I'm fine. And then just keep going until something like this happens. And I'm like, wait a second. You know, sometimes we're so oblivious to our emotions, to how we're feeling, because we're so much in our heads right here. And we don't really focus on our bodies and what it is saying. And so another way to send a message from our body, from our subconscious, is to create those addictions as well. So there's, you know, kind of 2 ways. It's helping us cope in a way, but it's also a message that maybe something, you know, needs to change. Maybe we need to connect to how we're feeling. We need to go to the root of the problem, pull it out and say, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. And I understand sometimes, you know, when people have work, when they have a situation that they cannot let go of, I'm not telling you to let go of this situation. I'm not telling you to let go of your work. I perfectly understand that, you know, we all need this in our lives to survive. But what I'm saying is that really put the boundaries in your work or whatever other situation that is causing you stress. Put the boundaries. Say what you need. Say, hello, I'm too tired right now. I cannot do this. I'm going to go way slower. If you don't want to stop, if you cannot stop this, then say, I'm going to go way slower. I'm going to do it my own way. And this is how it's going to be. You know, simply, that's it. You got to put your boundaries, because sometimes, you know, maybe people don't realize that maybe you're going through something and they just keep pushing. And if you keep saying yes, you're basically allowing those situations or the other people to come in your space and say, hey, you can keep doing this, you can keep doing this, and then you end up with stress, with anxiety, with burnout and all of these. So it takes a lot of awareness, and sometimes we're starting to fall into that pit, and it is making us realize like, oh wait, I'm doing this. So this takes, you know, a few tries. It's definitely not an easy path. This takes a few tries to bring that awareness, to kind of see, you know, what's going on inside. And my tips would really be to have a practice in place every day where you connect to yourself, you connect to your mind, you connect to your body, to your heart, and to how you're feeling. No, you're not a hippie if you're doing this. It doesn't mean that you can call yourself spiritual. You don't need to be spiritual to connect to your body and to how you're feeling. You just need to be human. I really recommend as well to maybe connect with a practitioner, you know, someone that is a coach, Reiki practitioner, or maybe talk to your therapist if you have access to a therapist or a psychologist. You know, whatever help for mental health that you need is very important when you start noticing that, you know, there's something that repeats and that keeps repeating. Okay, thank you for watching this video. If you like, don't forget to like, subscribe, and put the bell for the notifications. And I will see you in a next video. Okay, bye.